My name is Catherine Ornberg, otherwise known as Cotter. I am most definitely the cuter, smarter sibling. And I'm here to talk about canning foods from farm or garden or wherever, the community-supported farms to your table. How and why to preserve wonderful flavors of summer so that they can be enjoyed all year round. Folks have been preserving foods for many, many years. It started way back when they were drying, salting, fermenting, and those practices still go on today with a lot of success. You can still buy those things in a store, you can do them yourself, and they're quite healthy. So these methods work great, but eventually there was a need for getting more fresh foods to people, and that was especially with wars and people going to wars, men going to wars. They needed to be able to provide fresh foods for these soldiers. So there was this big call out, how can we do this? Could somebody figure it out? And it was quite a few years later, but they did come up with a way to can foods. The first workable canning methods were fine. They didn't always work, and that can be a little bit messy. Around the time of the Civil War, jars with rubber rings had been invented, and eventually big names like Kerr and Ball came out, and they each have their, Kerr is the wide mouth, Ball is the small mouth jars, and so you still see those everywhere today. So we can see why canning was a great idea back then, but what makes it so valuable today? Today you can run over to Hy-Vee or Walmart or Aldi's and get what you need. I mean, pretty much any time of the day or night. But, and people have mentioned this all day, as we've seen lately, we can't depend on that. We probably never could, but we didn't really know that. And COVID and all these things have really changed the look of that. So we've seen that we have shortages, we've seen we have supply chain issues, we see that we are dependent on government, we see there's an avian flu that comes in and destroys our birds so that we don't have eggs, and we're out of toilet paper and everybody panics. So these ways are not reliable. They're okay, but you can't rely on them. And being self-sustainable, or as self-sustainable as you can be, I think is really key. So we've become, I don't like to garden. And the reason why is because even though I grew up on this farm, I cannot stand to touch dirt. It's really weird. So I use my farmers markets. And now our family, after that whole avian thing came through, we said, we're getting chickens. So even though I live in Minneapolis, we have chickens. And, who doesn't love chickens? I mean, it's great. But just not being dependent for eggs, for foods. Tom and I barter for meat, vegetables, and he has a few of my chickens now. I don't trust also the quality of what they're selling. You go to Hy-Vee or Aldi or Walmart, what's in that can? What's in that box? What is it? It's a guessing game. And you can't get away from being dependent. You can't get away from it altogether, but I think as much as you can do is good, and it makes you feel good. Tom said I was an expert canner. I'm definitely not, but I'm very passionate about food. I've been passionate about food since I was little, and I love preserving. I've been canning for many years, and I lived in Alaska for almost 24 years. I just moved back about 2 years ago. And there's nothing quite like a fresh vegetable or a piece of fruit. Things there are shipped in, except for your cold vegetables, like she was talking about, the kale and the cabbage, and boy, you really get sick of kale and cabbage. And I wouldn't bother canning that. I mean, it's just great to be able to can things you just truly love. So after being there for so long, now I enjoy it. And I didn't grow up canning. Even though I grew up on a farm, my mother didn't can. She had a huge garden way over by where we drove through in that half bus. But when I was growing up, we had our rhubarb and we had strawberries on my uncle's farm, and then we would enjoy her huge garden all year, or all summer, and then apples in the fall, and then that was it. And the rest of the year, we didn't. We just didn't. My mother she froze sweet corn, but that was it. So it was later, I was married, and my husband's mother, they lived in New Ulm, and we would go down and visit them. Terrible cook. Terrible cook. Terrible cook. Terrible. I'd go there for about 4 days, and I would get very thin. But she could can like nobody's business. I mean, she could can anything and all things, and all of her canned goods were delicious. So I did the right thing. I started stealing from her. Late at night, I'd sneak down into her cellar, and I would pull out all the jars that I could fit, and I would put them in the back of our car so she wouldn't notice. Well, she did notice eventually, and she wasn't too mad, but she said, "You know what I'll do? I'll teach you to can." Well, those were probably the 2 longest days of my life. She was a nice lady, but mothers-in-law. But it was well worth it. So, started canning, loved it, had a passion for it, and then my husband said, "We're moving to Alaska." So I got there and there was nothing to can, so I started canning fish. My rule is if you can can meat, fish, those things, you can can anything. I mean, you've really got that seal down then. But the vegetables there, no good. They come in on a boat, they're about 2 weeks old. You buy a carrot, you eat it on the way home in the car because it's already old. They are not ripe, they are not fresh, and they are definitely not local. Not worth canning. Also, come about January 6th every year, I go into a deep depression. The winter is in full bloom, and the vegetables and the fruits are bland. For me, it's depressing. I like to have something nummy all the time. There is nothing quite like, at that moment, to go to my canning rack and pull out a beautiful jar of my local organic tomatoes and making a beautiful tomato basil soup and dunking a big fat grilled cheese sandwich in it. Or my beet salad with goat cheese, or a burger with jalapenos and pickles. Opening a jar of marinara that I've created, or pizza sauce that I've created, or salsa with tomatoes, beans, and corn. Everything is fresh. You pop that lid and you're like, you're back to summer. It's fantastic. And those things that are in that jar are either from the very few pots that I don't touch, or farmers market, or neighbors that are gardeners. And everything in there is exactly what I know. I know how much salt, I know what kind of vegetables I put in there, and I know how that will react for me. I like to know where things are grown. So if I go down to the Minneapolis farmers market, for example, or they have little offshoots, I go all the time. I go at least twice a week in the summer, and I like to go to visit with the farmers. And I like to know where they're gardening, where are their fields, what are their practices, and what they do and don't like about their job. It's truly, when I'm down there and I'm seeing these people and selling what they have, I mean, it's a little bit of like selling your soul. They grew those vegetables and fruits, and now I'm buying them from them so that I can nourish myself and my family. So that's why I do it. So back to canning itself. There are a few different types of canning. This guy that I have here, I brought it because it's broken. So in the move from Alaska to Minneapolis during COVID and rioting, some pieces got lost. So, but this is the pressure canner. I'm also missing the little grate that goes on the bottom. You always need a grate on your bottom so that you don't break your cans. And the way this guy works is you fill the bottom of it with about 2 to 3 inches of water, And this pressure canner is used for low acid foods. So your salmon is going to be pressure canned. Meats are going to be pressure canned. And you can kind of see, if you just look online, what you can can in which device. So most vegetables, asparagus, peas, beans, those are low acid foods. So either you have to equal out the acid that's in it and up it and do it a different way, or you have to do it in a pressure canner. And these are a little daunting when you first look at it because it's got a gauge and it's got a process, but it's lickety-split easy. The things that you don't need to pressure can for sure are pickles, sauerkraut, and tomatoes that you've added acid to. And the reason that you are interested in the acid thing is because of botulism. So you don't want botulism. It is a horrible way to die. I'm a nurse. I haven't seen it, but I've done a lot of reading on it. So you don't want to get botulism. So you put a little water in there, you wait for this to, your gauge isn't on there yet, you put your food in there with its brine, you put it in there, you lock this. See, it's broken, so hold on. There, you lock this, you wait for it to steam. You want it to steam for about 10 minutes, then you can pop your gauge on. And then you have to wait until you hear that steaming and you'll hear a little ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch, and that's how you know to start your timer for whatever you're canning. Then when you finish, this is key because I've burned myself, you turn the heat off and you let it rest. Just let that all come down. And then eventually you can pull this off and open this just like that. No further, and then you open it away from you. I've done all of those things wrong and I've paid. So boiling bath canners, that's this guy. It's got a little grate in the bottom. I use this a lot because I do a lot of tomatoes. And so this one boils the water to overboiling, and that's what kills the botulism spores. This does to boiling, so it's not as hot. So you can do the higher acid things in that. And then once you're finished with that, you take them out and the seal pops. Then there's one more that I'm going to talk about, and that's open kettle canning. This is not approved because it doesn't destroy organisms. However, it is what I do my pickles in. And I've never had a problem with it. But I also have a husband that eats it, and then I just wait and see what happens to him. Okay, so canning takes time. Picking out local produce takes time. Figuring out what these relationships are with your farmers takes time. Front end of canning is expensive because you have to buy your jars and you have to fight with your friends that you gave them some of those canned goods and they don't return your jars like Tom. And you have to buy your lids and all these little shenanigans things here. But then once you've made that first investment, then after that, then you're just buying those little flat lids that you can't find when it's a pandemic. For me, these things all give me joy. I love getting to know my local farmers. What they do and what gardeners do is priceless. They are growing quality, healthy, sustainable crops for people to dine on, and they are helping us take good care of ourselves. The best part about canning is knowing exactly what's in my jars, and I feel like there's a lot of food trickery out here, which people have talked about today. As I was kind of putting this little thing together, my son, very cheap, he's so cheap, he brought over a Breyer's ice cream, and I was eating it and I thought, God, this doesn't taste very good. Well, it's not ice cream, it's dessert, frozen dessert. I looked at it, not one ingredient did I recognize, not one. Poison. So it's another reason why I can local fresh foods from farmers that I get to know along the way. So then there's some things up here. I did bring some taste testers if you want. These are the pickles. Eat at your own, But I've never had a problem. And then a couple different types of salsas. And then there's a fig jam here. Figs are not from here, but they only are in season for a little bit of time. So when they come out, I do a little fig jam for my charcuterie trays. So I brought a little bit of cheese and some crackers if anybody wants to try that. And applesauce salsas. And then this is a tomatillo salsa, very delicious. So it's salsa verde. So that's all I have for you. Thank you.